Would you be able to escape, or would you become its next victim? These terrifying true stories reveal what happens when humans cross paths with nature's deadliest predators. From factory workers torn apart in Siberia to a legendary killer bear haunting a park, these attacks remind us that when a bear decides to strike, survival is never guaranteed. Whether it's a hiker's final moments caught on camera, police officers ambushed in Alaska, or oil workers stalked by a starving polar bear, these encounters prove that in the wild, you're never truly safe. On March 15, 2025, the harsh winter winds swept through Krasnogorsk, a remote town in Siberia where life was dictated by the seasons. The frozen landscape stretched endlessly, covered in snow and ice, making survival difficult for both humans and animals. The past few months had been brutal. Temperatures had dropped lower than expected, food was scarce, and wildlife had grown increasingly desperate. In the heart of the town stood an old fish processing factory, a rusting structure that had once been bustling but now operated with only a small skeleton crew. The factory was one of the last remaining businesses in the town, its workers braving the extreme cold to process frozen fish shipments before they were transported to larger cities. That night, 7 workers remained inside, handling the latest batch of shipments. Viktor Mikhailov, 54, the shift supervisor, had spent decades working at the factory, always ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Sergei Petrov, 41, was a skilled technician responsible for keeping the machinery running, while Yuri Kuznetsov, 39, was the factory's truck driver, waiting for the shipments to be loaded. Among the younger workers were Dmitry Ivanov, 29, and Pavel Smirnov, 31, 2 longtime friends who had grown up in Krasnogorsk and had little opportunity outside the factory. Anna Orlova, 27, the only woman on the shift, was known for her sharp attention to detail as she checked the frozen shipments. The last worker, Boris Vasilyev, 45, handled inventory, keeping track of the processed fish before they were sent out. Outside, in the deep darkness beyond the factory's rusted fence, something moved. A massive Russian grizzly bear, weakened by starvation, had been pushed closer to civilization than ever before. For months, the freezing cold and lack of food had driven it into a desperate state. It had caught the scent of fish drifting through the air, leading it toward the factory. The workers, focused on their tasks, had no idea what was coming. The bear moved through the snow, its powerful body barely making a sound. Its ribs were visible beneath its thick fur, a sign of starvation. It reached the factory's old gate, rusted and weak from years of neglect. With one massive push, the metal bars bent and snapped, allowing the beast to enter. Inside, the workers continued their shift, unaware of the danger creeping closer. Suddenly, the emergency lights flickered as the sound of breaking metal echoed through the factory. Before anyone could react, the bear charged through the main entrance, its massive form crashing into the processing area. Victor, closest to the door, was the first to be attacked. The bear swiped its enormous claws across his chest, tearing through his coat and flesh. He collapsed instantly, blood spilling onto the cold floor. Chaos erupted as workers screamed and scattered, trying to escape. Yuri, attempting to run, was knocked down as the bear lunged forward. The beast's powerful jaws clamped around his leg, dragging him backward before tearing into him. Sergei grabbed a metal pipe, swinging it desperately to fend off the bear. The nightmare had only begun. Sergei gripped the metal pipe tightly, his hands shaking. The bear, its eyes wild with hunger, turned toward him, its fur matted with blood. He swung the pipe with all his strength, striking the bear's head, but the blow barely fazed it. With terrifying speed, the bear lunged, knocking Sergei to the ground. Its massive claws tore into his side, shredding his coat and cutting deep into his body. His screams filled the air before fading as the bear's powerful jaws closed around his neck. The factory was in chaos. Workers ran in all directions, searching for any escape. The old metal walls echoed with the sounds of footsteps, crashing objects, and the bear's deep growls. Pavel and Dmitry sprinted toward the storage area, hoping to barricade themselves inside. Anna, frozen in fear, stood near the loading dock, her breath visible in the freezing air. The bear turned quickly, spotting Anna. It charged at full speed, knocking over crates and sending frozen fish flying across the floor. She tried to run, but the beast reached her first, swiping at her back with one giant paw. She fell forward, blood spreading across the icy floor as the bear's teeth sank into her shoulder. Pavel and Dmitri managed to slam the storage room door shut, holding it tightly as the bear thrashed outside, trying to break through. Boris, in another part of the factory, tried to escape through the back exit, but the bear had already cornered him. He barely had time to react before the grizzly tackled him, its claws slicing into his chest. The force of the attack sent him crashing against the wall. He struggled for breath as the bear delivered the fatal bite. Outside, neighbors had heard the screams and called the authorities. The town had seen bear sightings before, but nothing like this. A team of armed officers rushed toward the factory, sirens blaring as they arrived at the scene. Inside, the bear continued its rampage. The factory floor was littered with debris and the bodies of the fallen workers. Pavel, still in the storage room, gripped Dmitri's arm, both barely breathing as they heard the bear move toward the door. Just as it slammed against the metal, a series of gunshots rang out. The bear let out a deep roar before collapsing. Police entered the building cautiously, guns raised, making sure the bear was no longer a threat. The once busy factory was now silent, filled with broken crates, shattered glass, and blood-stained floors. By the time authorities secured the site, 7 workers were dead, their bodies lying in different parts of the factory. 3 others, including Dmitri and Pavel, were found critically injured, suffering from deep wounds and blood loss. The town was in shock. News of the attack spread quickly, reaching major cities across Russia. Wildlife experts arrived to investigate, determining that harsh winters and food shortages had driven the bear into such extreme aggression. A national debate followed. Some argued that human expansion into bear habitats was to blame, while others insisted that better safety measures should have been in place to prevent such a tragedy. Local authorities imposed new laws requiring stronger factory fences and emergency procedures for wildlife encounters. But the people of Krasnogorsk knew this would not be the last bear attack. The land was changing. The balance between humans and nature had been broken. On September 27, 2024, the golden hues of autumn covered the vast wilderness of Alberta, Canada. The towering peaks of the Canadian Rockies loomed over dense forests, where wildlife roamed freely. The park, known for its scenic beauty, had long been a destination for hikers, photographers, and nature lovers. Among the visitors that season were Daniel and Rachel Carter, a newlywed couple from Vancouver. Daniel, 31, was an avid outdoorsman, having grown up hiking in the Coast Mountains, while Rachel, 29, had only recently developed a love for the wild, encouraged by her husband. They had chosen this park as the perfect honeymoon destination, excited to explore its untouched trails. That morning, they set out toward Pyramid Lake, a breathtaking area surrounded by pine trees and famous for its still waters. The couple had planned to take a leisurely hike along the Pyramid Bench Trail, a route that offered stunning views of the lake and the distant peaks. The air was crisp, the scent of pine thick, and the quiet was only broken by the occasional chirp of a bird. Unknown to them, they were walking through territory claimed by a legend, Bear 112. For years, hikers and park rangers had shared stories about Bear 112, a massive old grizzly with a body covered in deep scars from past fights. The bear had been relocated multiple times due to its aggression, each time returning to the park as if drawn back by something unexplainable. It was known for breaking into campsites, charging at hikers, and stalking trails. Rangers had debated whether it was too dangerous to keep alive, but officials always hesitated. Bear 112 had survived decades in the wild, and some believed it should be left alone. The couple's hike started peacefully, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the trail. Daniel led the way with Rachel just behind, stopping now and then to take pictures. The trail was empty except for the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. They had no idea they were being watched. In the thick underbrush, Bear 112 waited, its dark eyes locked onto them. It had not eaten in days, and as colder weather approached, its instincts sharpened. The scent of humans was familiar. It had learned before that humans sometimes carried food, sometimes made mistakes, and sometimes were slow to react. Then Rachel unknowingly stepped on a fallen branch. The sharp snap broke the stillness, sending a signal through the trees. The grizzly charged, bursting from the underbrush in a blur of muscle and fur. Daniel barely had time to turn before the bear slammed into him, sending him crashing into the dirt. Its powerful claws raked across his back, tearing through his jacket and flesh. Rachel screamed, frozen in terror. Before she could run, Bear 112 lunged at her, knocking her off her feet. The bear's jaws clamped onto her arm, dragging her toward the trees as she struggled and kicked. The trail, once peaceful, had turned into a scene of horror. No one else was nearby, and the forest swallowed their cries. By the time the sun set, Daniel and Rachel were gone. Days passed before anyone realized Daniel and Rachel Carter were missing. They had planned to check out of their cabin on September 29, 2024, but when the staff noticed their belongings untouched and no sign of their departure, concern grew. Calls to their phones went unanswered. Park rangers were notified, and a search team was assembled immediately. Helicopters scanned the dense forests, while ground teams followed the Pyramid Bench Trail, hoping to find any trace of the missing couple. The weather had begun to turn, with the crisp autumn air growing colder and time was running out. On October 1st, 2024, searchers found their first clue. Near the trail's northern loop, shredded gear was scattered along the dirt path. Daniel's backpack was torn open, its contents spread across the ground. A few feet away, Rachel's camera lay cracked, its lens covered in dirt. The team's worst fears were confirmed when they spotted deep claw marks gouged into the soil, as if something massive had dragged a heavy weight through the forest. The search intensified. Rangers moved carefully, rifles ready. They had encountered grizzly attacks before, but nothing like this. On October 3rd, 2024, a ranger spotted Bear 112. The massive grizzly was pacing near a fresh carcass, its fur thick and scarred. The remains were barely recognizable, but forensic teams quickly determined they were human. Fragments of clothing and bone confirmed what everyone feared. Daniel and Rachel had been killed and partially eaten. The decision that followed was not easy. For years, Bear 112 had been relocated multiple times, each time finding its way back to Jasper. Officials had debated whether to euthanize it, but now, with 2 confirmed deaths, the choice was clear. A team of park rangers and expert trackers was sent out. Armed with tranquilizers and rifles, they moved cautiously through the dense forest, following the bear's fresh tracks. The mission was dangerous. Bear 112 was not just large, it was experienced in surviving human threats. For 2 days, the team followed trails of crushed leaves, broken branches, and fresh scat. The grizzly had vanished deep into the wild backcountry, but its movements were predictable. On October 5th, 2024, the team found Bear 112 near Malign Pass, feeding on a fresh deer carcass. A sharpshooter took position, his rifle steady. One shot rang through the forest. Bear 112 collapsed. The massive predator finally brought down after decades of evading human control. With the bear dead, a necropsy was performed. Inside its stomach, forensic teams found remains of deer and human flesh. The confirmation was horrifying, but it ended the mystery. They mourned the loss of Daniel and Rachel while also reflecting on Bear 112's tragic fate. The attack led to new safety regulations, stricter trail monitoring, and warnings about the risks of hiking in known bear territory. The legend of Bear 112 ended, but its story haunted the park forever. On November 3rd, 2024, the wind howled through the small fishing town of Larsen Bay, Alaska. Located on Kodiak Island, the town was home to fewer than 100 residents, mostly fishermen and their families. The community thrived on the rich waters surrounding the island, where salmon and halibut were plentiful. Among those responsible for keeping the town safe were Officer Jack Reynolds, 42, and Officer Eric Davis, 38. Both had served in Larsen Bay's small police force for years, handling everything from minor disputes to wildlife encounters. With no large city nearby, the officers were trained to handle emergencies alone, knowing that backup could take hours to arrive. Jack, a former U.S. Marine, had lived in Alaska for over a decade. He had seen bears before, but they rarely posed a direct threat to humans. Eric, originally from Anchorage, had transferred to Larsen Bay a few years earlier, adjusting to the quiet life of a small fishing town. That morning, the police station received multiple reports from residents who had seen a large bear wandering near homes. Some believed it was a black bear scavenging for food, but others insisted it was something much bigger. The town had seen Kodiak bears before, some weighing over 1,000 pounds, but they usually stayed near the forests and rivers, far from people. With no wildlife officers immediately available, Jack and Eric were dispatched to investigate. They grabbed their shotguns, flares, and radios, expecting a routine wildlife call. Driving through the quiet streets, they saw tracks in the fresh snow leading toward the edge of town, where thick brush met the open land. They followed the trail, their headlights illuminating the frost-covered ground. They pulled up near a small storage shed, where fresh claw marks had been scratched into the wood. Stepping out of the vehicle, Jack scanned the area while Eric checked the ground. The air was still and quiet. Too quiet. Then, from the dense brush, something moved. Before either officer could react, a massive Kodiak bear emerged, towering over them at nearly 10 feet tall. Its dark eyes locked onto the officers, its breath visible in the cold air. With terrifying speed, the bear charged. Jack barely had time to raise his shotgun before the bear was on them. The massive beast swiped at Eric first, its enormous claws tearing through his uniform and ripping deep into his leg. The force of the blow knocked him to the ground, pain exploding through his body as blood soaked into the snow. Jack fired a warning shot into the air, hoping to scare the bear off, but the animal did not retreat. Instead, it turned its head toward him, its muscles tensed to strike again. Eric struggled on the ground, his vision blurring from the pain as the beast prepared to attack once more. Jack had only seconds to act. Jack's heart pounded as the Kodiak bear turned its full attention toward him. The massive creature stood over Eric, who lay in the snow clutching his injured leg. There was no time to think. Jack fired another shot, this time aiming directly in front of the bear. The loud crack of the gun echoed through the trees. The bear flinched but did not retreat. It snorted heavily, its breath fogging in the cold air, muscles tensed, deciding whether to attack again. Jack knew they couldn't stay outside. Eric was bleeding badly and the bear was still too close. Eric groaned, his leg burning with pain. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the snow. His uniform was torn open where the bear's claws had slashed through, deep wounds exposing the flesh underneath. Jack stepped closer, still keeping his shotgun raised, and grabbed Eric by the shoulder of his jacket, dragging him backward toward their patrol vehicle. The bear huffed and took a step forward, but Jack quickly fired another warning shot, forcing the animal to pause. Reaching the police truck, Jack yanked the passenger door open, shoving Eric inside. Eric groaned in pain, gripping his leg tightly. Jack jumped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut just as the bear took another step forward. The massive creature circled the vehicle, pressing its heavy body against the metal, sniffing at the doors. Jack's hands clenched the wheel, his breath shallow. If the bear decided to strike again, they had nowhere to go. Then finally it stepped away, turning back toward the trees. It lingered for a moment before disappearing into the dark brush, its enormous frame vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Jack wasted no time. He switched on the sirens and sped back toward town, with Eric barely conscious beside him. At the local clinic, paramedics were already waiting. Eric was rushed inside, his leg badly injured but still intact. Doctors worked quickly, stitching the deep claw wounds and treating the blood loss. He would survive, but his recovery would be slow. Jack sat outside the clinic, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. He had seen bears before, but never one this aggressive. Wildlife officials were called in to track the Kodiak bear, concerned that it had become too comfortable near people. After 2 days of searching, they found the bear near a frozen river, still lurking close to town. Instead of euthanizing the animal, authorities chose to tranquilize and relocate it deep into the Alaskan wilderness, far from Larsen Bay. The hope was that it would stay away from humans, but no one knew for sure. The attack sparked debate among the townspeople. Some argued that human expansion was forcing bears too close to populated areas, while others believed that the bear should have been put down to prevent future attacks. Eric remained in the hospital for weeks, his leg healing but never quite the same. Jack carried the memory of that night with him, knowing how close they had come to something far worse. Larsen Bay moved on, but the warning remained. The wild was never far away, and neither were the creatures that ruled it. On July 14, 2024, the towering peaks of Rocky Mountain Park stood against the evening sky, their rugged beauty stretching across the Canadian Rockies. The summer air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine trees through the valleys where rivers flowed and wildlife roamed freely. For Peter Lawson, 45, this was the perfect place to spend time with his family. A longtime resident of Calgary, Peter had always loved the outdoors. His job as a construction project manager kept him busy, but every summer he made sure to take time off for an annual camping trip with his wife, Susan, 42, and their 16-year-old son, Jacob. This year they had chosen a popular campground near Lake Minnewanka, a breathtaking area known for its crystal-clear waters and endless hiking trails. They had arrived 2 days earlier, setting up camp in a scenic spot near a cluster of tall spruce trees. Their tent was pitched just a few feet from the fire pit, where they had spent the evening cooking over an open flame, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories under the stars. The campground was busy but peaceful, with other families enjoying the same escape into nature. Some had campfires burning late into the night, while others had already settled inside their tents, the only sound being the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. As the sky darkened, the Lawsons finished their meal and prepared for bed. They secured their belongings but left a cooler with food outside, believing it was safe enough. Jacob was the first to crawl into his sleeping bag, followed by Susan. Peter stayed up a little longer, making sure the fire was fully out before joining them inside. By midnight, the campground was quiet, the only noises coming from the distant sounds of owls hooting and the soft rush of the nearby river. None of them knew that just beyond the tree line, a massive grizzly bear was moving through the dark, sniffing the air. The bear, nearly 800 pounds, had been wandering the area for days, drawn by the smell of food left behind by campers. Though rangers had issued warnings about bear sightings, no one had expected an attack. The grizzly's powerful nose caught the scent of the cooler, leading it straight toward the Lawsons' tent. It moved silently at first, creeping toward the campsite, sniffing around the fire pit before focusing on the cooler left just outside the tent flap. Then with one massive swipe, the bear knocked the cooler over, spilling food onto the ground. Inside the tent, Peter stirred, hearing the noise. He assumed it was just the wind, until he heard heavy breathing just outside the fabric. Before he could react, the tent ripped open. In an instant, the grizzly lunged, grabbing Peter by the arm and dragging him out. Susan and Jacob screamed as the massive claws slashed through the tent, pulling Peter onto the dirt outside. The campground erupted in panic, but the bear was not done. The campground was no longer silent. Panic spread as screams filled the air, waking nearby campers who rushed out of their tents, trying to understand what was happening. The grizzly bear had already dragged Peter several feet from the tent, its powerful claws gripping him as it reared back, its massive frame towering over the campsite. Peter fought desperately, struggling against the bear's grip, but the animal was too strong. Its jaws clamped down on his shoulder, shaking him violently before slamming him onto the ground. The force of the attack sent shockwaves of pain through his body, his vision blurring as deep wounds opened across his chest. Susan and Jacob screamed for help, but they were frozen in terror. The bear growled, its deep rumbling sound cutting through the night air, drowning out the panicked shouts of nearby campers. A few campsites away, other visitors grabbed pots, pans, and flashlights, running toward the scene. They banged metal together, shined lights at the bear, and shouted in an effort to scare it off, but the grizzly did not back down. Instead, it turned toward the nearest person rushing to help. The bear lunged, knocking a young camper to the ground. Claws raked across his back, tearing through his jacket and into his skin. He managed to roll away, screaming in pain as blood soaked through his shirt. The campsite was now in complete chaos. Some people ran for their cars, others called for rangers, and a few brave campers continued to try to drive the bear away. Another camper, an older man who had been staying near the entrance of the campground, attempted to wave his arms and yell, trying to distract the bear. It turned toward him, growling before charging forward. The man tripped over a fallen log, and in an instant, the bear was on him. It swiped at his side, its claws cutting deep before knocking him to the ground. By now, park rangers had arrived, their trucks speeding down the dirt path, red and blue lights flashing. They jumped out with rifles and rubber bullets, immediately assessing the situation. The bear stood over Peter's motionless body, its breath heavy, blood on its fur. A series of loud pops rang out as the rangers fired rubber bullets, aiming to drive the bear away without killing it. The animal roared in anger, backing up slightly but still holding its ground. More rubber bullets struck its side, and after a tense few seconds, the bear finally turned and retreated into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. Rangers and paramedics rushed to the injured campers, but it was too late for Peter. His body lay still on the ground, deep wounds covering his chest and arms. Despite the efforts of those around him, he had not survived the attack. The two other injured campers were treated on site before being transported to a hospital. They had deep wounds, but would survive. The next morning, rangers tracked the grizzly bear deep into the backcountry. After confirming it was the same animal, they made the decision to euthanize it to prevent further attacks. The incident sparked outrage and debate across the country. Some believed that the bear was only following its instincts, driven by hunger and easy access to food left out by campers. Others argued that stricter regulations should be enforced to keep bears away from human sites. In response, the park officials introduced new policies, requiring all food to be stored in bear-proof containers and increasing ranger patrols in high-risk areas. Susan and Jacob left the park in grief. Their lives changed forever. The tragedy left a permanent mark, a reminder of the delicate balance between humans and nature. On September 10, 2024, the sun rose over a park in Northern Carolina, casting a golden glow over the rolling hills and dense forests. The morning air was crisp, filled with the sounds of birds singing and leaves rustling in the wind. Among the many visitors exploring the vast wilderness was Lisa Reynolds, 33, an experienced solo hiker and wildlife photographer from Asheville, North Carolina. She had spent years hiking through the Appalachian Mountains, documenting her adventures on social media. Her followers admired her courage, her love for nature, and her ability to navigate the most remote trails with confidence. Lisa had planned a 2-day trek along the Deep Creek Trail, a scenic route known for its waterfalls and peaceful campsites. She carried a lightweight backpack with supplies, a camera, and bear spray, aware of the risks of hiking alone in bear country. Before setting off, she posted a photo of the sunrise over Clingman's Dome, captioning it as the start of another incredible journey into the wild. The first day passed without trouble. Lisa followed the winding trail through thick forests, stopping occasionally to take photos of the cascading streams and the towering oak trees. She passed a few hikers along the way, exchanging polite greetings before continuing deeper into the wilderness. By the afternoon, she had reached her planned campsite near a small clearing, setting up her one-person tent beside a fallen log. She cooked a simple meal and took a few last photos before the sun dipped below the mountains. As night fell, the sounds of the forest grew louder. The distant call of an owl, the rustling of small animals moving through the underbrush. Lisa had hiked alone many times before, and these sounds brought her comfort rather than fear. She slept peacefully, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. By mid-morning on September 11th, Lisa continued her trek, following the narrow trail through thick vegetation. The forest was quiet, the only sound being the occasional crack of twigs beneath her boots. She didn't know she was walking straight into the territory of a black bear. The bear had been wandering this section of the park for weeks, drawn by food scraps left behind by careless hikers. It had become too comfortable around humans, learning that campsites often meant easy meals. Lisa reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley where she decided to take a break. She set down her backpack, pulled out her camera, and aimed toward the distant peaks covered in mist. She never heard the bear approaching from behind. Without warning, the black bear lunged, knocking Lisa forward onto the ground. She gasped as sharp claws tore through the back of her jacket, pain surging through her shoulder. Lisa scrambled to grab her bear spray, but the bear swiped at her again, knocking it from her hands. She kicked and struggled, trying to push the animal away, but it was relentless. The fight was just beginning. Lisa struggled as the black bear pressed its weight down on her, its powerful claws tearing into her clothing. The scent of earth and fur filled her lungs, panic setting in as she tried to push the animal off. The bear's jaws clamped onto her arm, shaking her violently. She screamed as sharp teeth pierced her skin, blood soaking through her sleeve. She kicked at the bear's chest, but it refused to let go. Her backpack lay just inches away, where her bear spray had rolled onto the ground, but she couldn't reach it. She twisted her body, trying to crawl backward, but the bear lunged again, knocking her hard against the rocky ground. Claws raked across her ribs, deep gashes opening along her side. Her breath came in gasps, her strength fading as the bear struck again. She had spent years hiking alone, always prepared for the dangers of the wilderness. But this was different. The bear wasn't acting out of fear. It was relentless, aggressive, unwilling to back down. Her camera, still recording, lay a few feet away, capturing the terrifying moments unfolding before it. As Lisa's struggles weakened, the bear dragged her toward the trees, disappearing into the thick underbrush. 2 days passed before hikers noticed an abandoned backpack on the trail. Rangers were alerted, and a search team was sent out immediately, combing through the dense forest. On September 13, 2024, they found the remains. Lisa's body lay deep in the woods, partially covered by leaves and dirt. Claw marks ran along her arms and torso, and her torn clothing showed the full extent of the attack. Near the site, her camera was recovered, still intact. The footage confirmed what had happened. She had been ambushed. The attack shocked the hiking community, raising immediate concerns about bear behavior in the park. Wildlife officials determined that the bear had become too familiar with human presence, likely due to hikers leaving behind food and waste. The decision was made to track the bear. Using traps and motion cameras, rangers monitored the area, searching for any sign of the aggressive animal. After several days, they located the bear near a river, scavenging through another campsite. To prevent future attacks, the bear was euthanized. The incident sparked intense debate. Some argued that humans were responsible, having made bears too comfortable around them by leaving food behind. Others believed that dangerous bears should be removed sooner, before tragedies like this occurred. Park officials strengthened bear safety rules, enforcing stricter regulations on food storage and trash disposal. Hikers were urged to carry bear spray at all times and to avoid hiking alone in known bear territories. Lisa's social media remained flooded with messages, with followers mourning the loss of someone who had inspired many to explore the wild. The forest remained unchanged, but the lessons learned from her tragic end would never be forgotten. On December 5, 2024, the wind howled across the icy expanse of Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, where a small team of oil rig workers braced against the raging snowstorm. The remote drilling station, surrounded by miles of frozen tundra, was their workplace and home for weeks at a time. The nearest settlement was hours away, leaving them completely cut off from civilization when storms rolled in. Among the crew was Mark Hastings, 46, an experienced mechanical engineer who had worked in the Arctic for over a decade. He was respected for his ability to fix anything, from faulty generators to frozen fuel lines. His closest friend on the rig was Ethan Cooper, 39, a safety supervisor responsible for keeping the workers prepared for emergencies. There was also Jonas Miller, 50, the oldest of the group, a veteran oil driller who had seen it all and often laughed at the younger men's concerns about the cold. Rounding out the team were two younger workers, Riley Kent, 32, and Javier Torres, 35, both newcomers to Arctic work but eager to prove themselves. They joked about the harsh conditions, calling the station a metal prison in the snow. That evening, the men gathered in the break room, their boots leaving wet streaks on the floor as they warmed their hands over mugs of hot coffee. The storm outside showed no signs of stopping, thick snow whipping against the steel walls of the rig. Jonas leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. They all laughed, unaware that something was already watching them from the storm. Later that night, Ethan made his routine security rounds. As he checked the perimeter of the rig, something caught his eye. Near the southern wall, long claw marks streaked across the metal siding. At first, he assumed it was just ice scraping against the structure, but the marks were too deep, too deliberate. He frowned, his breath visible in the freezing air. The next morning, Riley spotted something strange near the fuel storage area. Tracks, huge tracks, pressed deep into the snow. They circled the building, leading toward the shadows beyond the rig lights. Jonas scoffed, waving it off as nothing more than a wandering fox. But by nightfall, the security cameras told a different story. Through the grainy footage, a gaunt, starving polar bear emerged from the storm, its white fur blending with the ice. It moved slowly, sniffing the air, circling the rig's perimeter like a predator sizing up its prey. The men watched the footage in stunned silence. The bear was waiting. They sat frozen, staring at the screen. The polar bear outside was unlike anything they had seen before, its ribs pressed against its fur, its movements slow but determined. It was desperate, a starving predator in search of food. Ethan turned up the volume on the security feed. The bear sniffed the air, its massive paws sinking deep into the snow. It paced back and forth, watching the structure as if waiting for an opportunity to strike. The team locked every entrance, securing the metal doors with extra bolts. No one was going outside, but the storm was still raging. By the third night, the generator malfunctioned, plunging part of the rig into darkness. Without it, the heating system would fail, leaving them vulnerable to the Arctic cold. Mark, being the lead engineer, knew he had to fix it. The generator was housed in a small external shed just a few yards from the main building. The cameras showed no sign of the bear at the time. Mark grabbed his heavy coat, radioed the others, and stepped outside. The wind whipped against his face, the cold seeping through his gloves as he trudged toward the generator shed. His boots crunched against the ice and his breath formed thick clouds in the air. Inside the shed, he flipped open the panel, adjusting the wiring as he had done 100 times before. It was routine work. Then the wind died down. A deep, heavy snorting sound came from behind him. Before he could react, the polar bear lunged, knocking him against the metal wall. Its claws tore through his coat, slicing into his side. He gasped in pain, struggling to push the animal away. Inside the rig, the others heard the noise on the radio. There was silence. Outside, Mark struggled, kicking at the bear's massive frame, but it was too strong. With one final swipe, the bear sent him crashing into the snow. His radio crackled, but he couldn't reach it. The last thing he saw was the bear's dark eyes staring down at him before everything went still. By morning, the storm had weakened, and the team ventured outside. They followed the tracks leading away from the rig, stopping near the edge of the snowfield. There, they found Mark's blood-stained boot, half buried in the ice. His body was gone, dragged away into the endless white tundra. Armed with flares and rifles, the men searched the perimeter, but the bear had vanished. Only a single, bloody trail remained. Emergency responders arrived later that day, but there was nothing left to recover. The attack sent shockwaves through the oil industry. Questions arose about whether polar bear activity near drilling sites was increasing due to climate change and food scarcity. Some argued that the bear was only acting out of survival, while others demanded stricter security measures to prevent similar attacks. In the following weeks, new protocols were introduced, requiring oil workers in remote areas to carry firearms and remain indoors at night. Additional fencing was installed around workstations, but nothing could erase what had happened. Mark's name was etched into a memorial at the site, a reminder that even the toughest workers were no match for the Arctic wilderness. The bear was never seen again, lost in the ice and snow, a ghost of the tundra.